All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council regular meeting for Monday, February 3rd. We just have one study session item for tonight. We have the Director of Utilities and South Platte Renew, Peter Van Ryan, guest Nicole Rowan, with she's the Director of the Water Control Division of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, here to provide an update on the Englewood Utilities Environmental and Compliance Programs. Good evening, Peter.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're happy to be here tonight to just give you a general overview of our regulatory compliance programs for Englewood water and sewer utilities. And I just wanted to recognize some staff in the audience. Chris Edelstein, who is our environmental compliance manager. Lauren Worley, who is our environmental compliance coordinator. Dave Kaler, who's one of our environmental techs who does a lot of field work. And then all of them are under Josh Roach, who's our Deputy Director of Operations and Maintenance. And so if you all are here, could stand up, that'd be great. Just want to recognize the four of them. So they're the ones that make all this stuff happen. So I want to make sure that they are duly acknowledged. Okay, so what we want to cover today is really just an overview of where we're at from a regulatory perspective for the city. And so if you recall, when we first started this overhaul of the Englewood water utility in March of 2020, were experiencing a number of violations with the state with our regulatory compliance programs. And we had a number of regulatory issues over that next 18 months where we were sending notifications to our customers and or specific mailings to our customers, and then we had the unfortunate issue with the boil order. And so we wanted to run through just where we're at from that when we started in 2020 to where we are today, and allow Nicole to also to talk from a state's perspective in terms of what the state is seeing as it relates to Englewood utilities. So you can see what we have is we're in compliance with all of our regulatory requirements. But just a quick list, we have a new compliance framework. We hired the professionals that I just introduced. We were officially designated a large system, which means we serve over 50,000 people. So while our population is 35,000, when you consider the number of people who come into the city for work, it pushes our total population served by the water system to over 50,000, which triggers a different set of regulatory requirements. We've complied with our total coliform rule. Our lead and copper program is underway, which you've all heard about quite a bit over the last year and a half. Storage tank inspections, which was an issue these are the white overhead storage tanks that we have two of in the city. Back in 2020, we had issues with the inspection compliance on those. PFAS, sampling of PFAS, ensuring that our customers are aware of what levels of PFAS we have in drinking water, which is below the regulatory level for PFAS. And then ultimately, one of our biggest issues at the time was our backflow prevention program. That was the one where we had to send the postcard out because we didn't meet the regulatory requirements of that program. And essentially, what we did end up doing with that backflow program is we accelerated what was a 5-year compliance ramp-up schedule into essentially 9 months. And this is one of the first things Josh did when he got here, is he got a hold of that program and turned it from basically paper records in a filing cabinet to a fully compliant program over the course of 9 months. So what was supposed to take 5 to 10 years to implement was done in 9 months. So it was a pretty heavy lift. Okay, so the compliance framework is basically a dashboard that we use that allows us to keep track of these things. So much of the system used to be tracked with paper records. We are now tracking those systems in an organized fashion to make sure that we're meeting the regulatory deadlines when they're required. We have those deadlines established so that when we're coming up on a deadline, we're ensuring that we're able to not miss a deadline. We've talked about staffing. Raw water accounting is another area where we need to account for our water use every day. We work with the state engineer's office on that. And so every day that we're pulling different water rights from different decrees that we have to provide that accounting to the state. So we're sure that we're in compliance with our decrees. And so that program is now in place, which has really helped us stabilize and ensure that long-term we're meeting our water rights decrees. The large system designation was in September 2022. As I explained before, it's based on 50,000 population served. And essentially what it does is when you get to that level of service, there's a greater amount of regulatory compliance items that we need to follow through on. We've done that. We've worked with CDPHE on rulemakings. We've gone through what's called a RAW process, which is a record of approved waterworks. We've completed that, and we're in compliance. And then the state disinfection process, which we've passed, which those are done together. The RAW it's RAW and DOVE is what it is. And so we've completed all those and passed all those in the last few years. One of the things we did with our total coliform rule. So if you recall, this was what we ultimately traced the boil order to, was a meter pit that had that was leaking into where we were taking samples off of a hose bib off of a house. And so we were introducing the house as a potential area of, sorry, I'm on two different decks here. As a potential point of contaminant. The way we have corrected that is we bought what are called sample stations, and so we hooked those sample stations into the actual the connection at the meter point, and that gets us as close to our actual distribution system as possible. So we remove that potential vulnerability that's associated with internal plumbing around a house, and so it's a much more industry accepted approach for a large water utility that we've put in place. It took the purchasing those sample stations and getting them deployed into our sample locations, and then ultimately, now that we've had those in place, we're actually adding more sampling stations, or getting more sampling stations, so we have more availability to potentially pull from different sites. Since then, we've had no rule violations and no monitoring plan violations. So lead and copper, we've talked quite a bit about. This is a regulatory program that we as Englewood have decided to get ahead of, as opposed to waiting for the regulatory deadlines to force us to react. And ultimately, what that's allowed us to do is access the federal funding that came through the bipartisan infrastructure law, use that money to help us fund a program that was originally, back in 2020, unfunded. We estimated that it could be anywhere from $40 to $80 million, and we had a programmatic amount of $1 million a year. So if it's an $80 million program, it's going to take a while. So now we're able to work through what we think is approximately under 3,000. I think it's in the mid 2,000s, maybe 2,500, something like that. We are, as of January 17th, we're at 502 replacements complete, so we're about 20% of the way through. We've potholed over 1,500 service lines. Ultimately, we'll be potholing every line that is pre-1960. So if the home was built pre-1960, we'll physically verify at the street and at the curb stop that line is not lead. What that has allowed us to do by taking that accelerated approach to removing lead service lines is it's allowed us to put off any need or eliminate any need for what's called optimal corrosion control in terms of additional infrastructure to add an orthophosphate or something to help protect that layer on the lead service lines. So by removing all the lines, we're actually saving capital investment on a system that ultimately, when we add more phosphorus to the water system, we end up needing to take it out at the treatment plant, which costs us more money on the other end. And so ultimately, when we get the lead service lines removed, we'll be able to accomplish that optimal corrosion control using pH adjustment. So we just keep it at a higher level of pH, and that way it doesn't leach out whatever may be protecting the water supply from lead. Okay, storage tanks, I talked about that a little bit. These are two overhead. We did have an issue with, an issue with inspection compliance on these. That is now in that environmental compliance program framework. We've also installed new level sensors to help us understand what level those tanks are at. We've improved the outflow, the overflow and outlets of those tanks, and then also done a structural analysis and we looked at the coatings to see what the life of the coating is and when we will potentially need to repaint those. So that is those are pretty substantial infrastructure pieces that are now on a regular schedule of periodic review. Our dam safety program, so we have a number of dams that are part of Englewood's system. We have that's also now in our environmental compliance framework, and we are inspected annually on those dams. So McClellan Reservoir is the one that's closest. That's down by County Line and Santa Fe. And then we have the one up in the mountains, which is Meadow Creek. We also have a couple dams at the Allen plant site. All of those get inspected to ensure that they're in compliance with the state engineer's office, and we have been in compliance with those. We've talked a number of times about PFAS. So PFAS are forever chemicals that are become much more of an issue in recent years. We have gone through a couple cycles of sampling of both our source water and our finished water to ensure that we are meeting the compliance regs for PFAS, which our finished water does meet those regulations. However, we are also piloting, we secured a grant for $426,000 to do two things. One is to do a source water assessment of where PFAS is coming into our systems, as well as piloting a system. We're piloting a system at the Allen plant to remove PFAS. So even though we're within the regulation, we exceed what's called the health advisory level, but we are below what's called the maximum contaminant level. So that's our regulatory level that we're held to. By continuing to investigate piloting for removal processes, we'll still continue to look for ways to remove those chemicals from our water system. The issue with these chemicals, as we've talked about before, is they're in just thousands of products, and they're in thousands of household products, and the majority of what impacts our source water is household product related. And so it's a much bigger national issue that we're working on. The last piece on this is we've talked about the cases that we've joined in terms of trying to recover some amount of settlement out of any of the class action cases, which we've entered into, I believe, 4 of them so far, and there's just a number of them that are out there as well. Our backflow program, this was that one that I told you when we first started. It was some papers in a filing cabinet, and we had no one that actually had a sense of what our inventory was, and we were coming up on the end of our compliance deadline to get it implemented. And so we worked furiously to comprehensively assess and inventory all of our backflows. We're still working through some cross connections that have been found and eliminating those cross connections. Those are all within compliance with the program now. However, we'll talk a little bit about a paperwork issue that we had this last year that we'll talk a little bit more about. A lot of the issue with backflow is customer education and making sure that people understand when a backflow is needed and how often they need to test them and those kinds of things. There was a little bit of a hiccup last year with the state rules. The state legislation passed a rule that essentially said that backflow testing could only be done by licensed plumbers, which then put a whole bunch of certified backflow people in a state of confusion, I guess, in terms of those were the people that were certified. So that's been corrected for now, and we anticipate that the legislature will fix that long term. You can see numbers on backflow. We verified 1,400 plus commercial and multifamily connections. We've identified 458 unprotected cross connections. And so a cross connection is where there's a potential for water to siphon back into the distribution system, which we don't want. Once we find those, we put a backflow in. Backflow is essentially an air gap, and so it protects whatever that downstream system, our system is, from whatever that downstream system is, so you don't get some kind of a pressure back siphoning, and if it's a chemical or if it's a contaminant, it makes it into the system. So we've increased our backflow amount from 1477 in 2022 to 2098 today. So you can see we've added more since we found those cross connections. And then ultimately, on that last bullet, we had our what's called our sanitary survey. It's an inspection that we go through where they essentially look at the entire regulatory system as well as the treatment plant to make sure that we're in compliance with what we are required to be in compliance with. And we did have an issue on our backflow program. Oh, shoot, sorry, I forgot to give you a second to see those numbers because, sorry, I forgot to advance the slide. But yeah, 1462, and we're up to almost 2100 today. And then the results of the sanitary results is we had 3 plant issues. So these were, as the inspections were occurring, 3 things that they identified that were findings that we actually got corrected immediately before the end of that week. We did have 1 violation for our backflow program, it's called a Tier 3 violation, which is a paperwork violation. And so essentially what happened was during the fall of 2023, there was a transition of how the backflow program was being implemented between the state and local agencies. And what this came down to was allowing an extension for a church and I believe it was a medical facility were 2 that we allowed extensions for. But according to the rules, we weren't in a position at that point in time that we could allow for the extension. So one of them actually got the backflow issue resolved within, didn't need the extension. The other one had it resolved within 10 days of that extension date. And so in reality, there was no real issue. It's just it was uncovered as a programmatic paperwork approach that requires us to notify within our CCR Consumer Confidence Report annually, which will go out in May or June of this year. So you'll see that 1 violation in the CCR this year, and it's related to that administering an extension before we were actually able to administer that extension for essentially 2 properties, one of which only used the extension by 10 days. So it's more of a technicality as it relates to what we have to follow through based on the requirements of the law. But overall, once we got through that sanitary sanitary review, the system is in really good regulatory health, and we feel like we've got a good handle on our systems that have been a significant advancement from paper files in filing cabinets and desks that didn't have any real long-term strategy to ensure that knowledge transfer and things like that occurred. So that is a general overview of what we've been doing from a regulatory framework perspective since we started in 2020. I'm now going to just turn this over to Nicole Rowan, who's the director of the Water Quality Control Division at CDPHE, we're fortunate that we get to work with Nicole and her staff often on these types of issues, and I really appreciate Nicole coming to talk with council about any questions you may have about our regulatory programs. And so I'm going to turn this over to her for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for having me tonight for this important discussion. I appreciate being here. My name is Nicole Rowan, and I serve as the director of the Water Quality Control Division at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And our team is charged with implementing the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act here in Colorado. Our division greatly values the long-standing partnership we have with the City of Englewood. And tonight I want to focus on 3 areas and kind of reiterate some of the points that Peter made with respect to water quality compliance, infrastructure improvements, and your proactive approach to protecting drinking water. So with respect to compliance, we really appreciate all the efforts to maintain very high standards within the drinking water program at Englewood. As Peter mentioned, Englewood currently has no water quality or treatment technique violations, which is a very commendable achievement that demonstrates your commitment to public health. And following the 2021 boil water order, your improvements, such as refining the total coliform sampling collection procedures and installing those dedicated sampling stations, have provided more accurate assessments of water quality and avoided potential sampling errors. We really appreciate the infrastructure and process enhancements that Peter described. You know, the upgraded water main and line break repair processes significantly reduces the risk of contamination during service repair disruptions. And, you know, our department was very pleased to partner with you all to assist with a grant for online chlorine analyzers, which are critical for real-time monitoring of your disinfection processes. And just with respect to the sanitary survey inspection that Peter mentioned, you know, your team was very proactive in resolving all of the deficiencies, and really appreciate, you know, the understanding with the paperwork issue and the importance of transparency and following those federal procedures with respect to public notification. I appreciate all the work there. We, you know, also really appreciate all of the infrastructure improvements that are ongoing. You know, the enhanced disinfection and pH control. Again, optimizing the disinfection treatment to better protect against waterborne disease, and the pH control are really key, again, to managing the lead levels within the system to ensure that water remains safe. And we also appreciate all the work that you're doing that's really innovative with respect to the aesthetics of the water, and know that's important to the community. And finally, I think I just wanted to highlight some of the things that you're doing that are really proactive. Again, the lead service line replacements and seeking the funding for that and getting ahead of those federal requirements is a great approach, and you should all be commended for that. With respect to PFAS as well, you know, you've been very cooperative and transparent with our team as we have worked to inform the public about this. It's really challenging with the health advisory and the MCL levels, as Peter talked about. It's very difficult from a risk communication perspective, and just appreciate all the transparency there. And we are really excited to see the results of the pilot study that we funded for PFAS for treatment techniques that you're investigating. I understand as council members, you're deeply invested in ensuring the safety and sustainability of your water supply, and your efforts in infrastructure investment and response to issues that have been rapid and detailed really show a clear public communication effort, and they have tangible results for all of your residents. I think it's important to know that we really value our partnership with you all. Protecting our water resources is a shared responsibility, and the strong partnership between Englewood and our division is vital to overcoming challenges and setting standards for water quality in Colorado. So thank you for your continued commitment to safeguarding drinking water in Englewood, and thank you again for having me here tonight.
Director Rowan, thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you very much for the overview of how we got here today. And just really appreciate the overview of our successes. Director Van Wright, thank you very much for the overall presentation. I'm going to open it up to council for any questions or comments. Go ahead, Member Nunekamp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for being here tonight. It's a wonderful, I guess, a way to encapsulate everything that's been happening in this one part of the division, which is amazing. I have a question about PFAS, something that we talk about a lot around here, and how you are reacting or responding to the changes in the federal administration's thinking around additional regulations coming from PFAS. I know we've been waiting for more regulations, thinking about how we're going to plan for that. How are you responding, and does this change any of our planning? And I'm curious both from the Englewood perspective, but then also if the state has anything in their plans.
So from our perspective, we haven't seen anything that's causing us to deviate from our plan right now, which is we're still in the piloting phase. We're doing that source water or source identification, and then ultimately we're working to at a legislative level eliminate the use of PFAS compounds in products, and so we make incremental gains in that process annually. Last year we had a rule that helped that passed that helped that more, but there's still products that have PFAS, and so they're still going to concentrate in wastewater. They're still going to end up in the source water, and so until we can fully eliminate PFAS from the products, we're always going to have something to be dealing with as it relates to PFAS. So that's why we're going to continue down our path relative to the class action suits, but also the piloting and trying to figure out ways to treat our water for it. Even though we are currently below the contaminant level, we don't know that might change in the future. So we're not necessarily stopping. As far as a federal level and how that's coordinating with the state, I'm going to turn that over to Nicole.
Thank you so much for the question. I think from the federal perspective, there's a lot changing very rapidly right now. I haven't heard any plans to potentially veer from the current regulation that was finalized last year. That could happen, but we haven't seen any indication of that right now. I think Colorado has been a leader in the country in trying to address this issue since about the middle of last decade. And so we've kind of experienced a couple of different federal administrations with respect to this and, have our own state plans. Again, building on what Peter said, really focusing on stopping the source of exposure and really trying to, focus upstream as much as we can in preventing these from getting in the system to begin with. But there's going to be the legacy issues that we have to deal with for a long time.
Thank you.
Member Ward.
My question is in regards to the regulatory notices that we're required to send to our water users. It seems like we are sending these on a relatively frequent basis. We broke this rule, or we got caught for this, or I don't know exactly how to explain it. You explained it better than I did, but it's a tier 3 public notice is what's referred to here. And my question is, when your average person opens that notice and they see we have a violation, it may look more severe than it actually is. And when we had the boil order, for instance, we were told that there was specific language prescribed. We couldn't add anything. We couldn't take anything away. It just had to say this. And it was very alarming to the people in our community, even though we knew at the time that we sent that notice that it wasn't a widespread issue. I guess I have one question for Director Van Rye, which is what can we do to sort of mitigate the damage that this causes to confidence in the system in the future? And then Ms. Rowan, I don't know if there's anything on a state level that we can do. I mean, I understand the purpose of these notices, but for the average person receiving this in the mail, like I said, it's very alarming, or it can be very alarming, and it creates an appearance that something other than what's actually happening is happening. We've made great strides, as you've indicated, in the way our water system works and how we're planning for the future, and someone might not get that impression when they get this regulatory notice.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Yeah, I think I think you're hitting on some of the balance of that we're trying to strike with staying in compliance with the federal regulation, the drinking water regulations, while also indicating in the notification, which is required, the degree to which this is something that people should be concerned about. So what are we doing to mitigate that? So when we first, the inspection was last summer, and we worked back and forth with the state for quite a few weeks to make sure that we were appropriately characterizing what the potential issue was, which ended up being essentially a paperwork issue. One of the ways that we're trying to help to indicate the degree to which, or to add clarity to that, is by being here tonight, by inviting Director Rowan to come talk to the council and from a state's perspective, so that you all can, if you're getting calls from your constituents saying, hey, what is this? You get more of a macro view of where we are from a regulatory program perspective. In 2020, we were in rough shape, and the number of things that you see them summarized here, but the amount of work that has gone into going from essentially, we've talked about underinvestment, it's not just underinvestment in physical infrastructure. It was underinvestment in staffing, it was underinvestment in systems, it was underinvestment in essentially regulatory follow through, to the point where once you start to uncover, flip over the rock and see what's underneath, you realize, okay, we're in for a few years of this. And so it was unfortunate that we ended up with that violation. However, the regulation is a regulation. So we thought that one of the ways to help mitigate and to help level set what our customers should think is by being here tonight. And if you get a question from one of your constituents, you can point them to this discussion. And it's not just me saying it. We're with the state here. So I think that's from our perspective. As far as the second part of your question for Director Rowan, I'm gonna, if you recall what that second part was.
Yeah, I think it was maybe related to the language in the notice, and I think that is something we can try to work with the city on as we move forward with that, just to make sure that it's clear of what the violation was. But again, as Peter indicated, I think we felt it was important to be here tonight for this discussion, especially around the violation, for you to know just how much we appreciate all you've done to work on your drinking water system over the last few years, and just appreciate all that hard work.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate seeing the advancement of the partnership with CDPHC that having you here tonight shows. I think we are making progress, and thanks for being here tonight.
Member Wright.
Thank you. Thank you both, Director Ben Ryan, Director Rowan. And it's nice to see faces here of the people that are doing the work, and I appreciate you being here and everything that you do. I just have a couple questions. I have to tab my pages. For the sampling stations, it says in 2023 there were 33 dedicated. September 24, additional stations were ordered. I believe you stated that those were in place now. Is that correct?
So the 33 are in place. The additional ones that are ordered is because we have to expand our number of sampling sites based on the new lead and copper rule that we're now subject to, which is associated with becoming a large utility. So I'm going to turn around and check with Josh here and put him on the spot and see if are those installed. They're not all installed
goal is to, if we ever take a sample anywhere,
Actually, can I bring up Josh Roach? our-
Yeah,
Great.
Josh, I was gonna ask you,
That way
to
everybody
speak into
can
the
hear.
mic for those listening online.
just squat here.
Yeah.
They're not all installed yet, but we're in the active process of doing that. And the goal is if we ever if we ever have to take a sample at any place, that we're taking it through that station, not through the house. So it's our goal to never take a sample from a house spigot that's real close to the dirt and we're turning it on, trying to clean it. The goal is to stop doing that completely. And right now, we're pretty much there. We're putting some more in to make sure that we never have to do that again.
What will that total number of stations be? Because it didn't say.
It'll be
in-
close to 100-ish or so once we're completely done with the sample stations.
We have 33 in right now.
Same problem.
Come on down, everybody.
Or Josh, you could just repeat it.
We have 33 installed right now. Then we've ordered 66 more to have upstream and downstream from those 33. So it'll be 99 total at the end.
Okay, fantastic.
No, no, too.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay,
And just for clarification, that was Chris Edelstein, our environmental compliance manager and utilities.
great. Thank you, Chris. Okay, and then it also said that you're gonna pothole any home that was built pre-1960.
Yes.
We're having a lot of homes that are being taken away and rebuilt. So are you using the assessor's office to identify pre-1960 and earlier homes?
So that's one of the areas that, once we get through the ones that are obviously have been, are obviously the original build, when we come across sites that look like they've been a rebuild, we are going back through to make sure that we didn't miss something in terms of maybe it was remodeled in the 80s or something like that. And so that's the last step in trying to comprehensively ensure that we don't have any lingering lead out there. It's also the reason why we're also taking it at the street as opposed to on either side of what we were originally talking about was either side of the curb stop or either side of the meter pit. The reason we're doing it right at the street is because sometimes what would happen is a house would get their service line replaced, but they'd only replace it to that curb stop or they'd only replace it to that meter, and then you'd have this 6, 8, 10-foot piece of lead that's still connected to the pipe. But if you were just to take it in that localized area, it would look like it's a copper line, whereas in actuality, we're trying to ensure that that every piece of potential lead between the pipe and the house is being picked up.
Okay, perfect. And then just left field question, but I did get a call about it. Someone was asking the dam safety program, why are all the trees removed near the dam?
So the reason we remove trees near dams is because roots cause basically piping tunnels for seepage to, roots will fail a dam structure. And so anytime we see trees or anything that's not small vegetation to stop surface erosion, we pull those out because we don't want that root intrusion to compromise the internal integrity of that earthen dam.
Okay.
That's why we remove those.
Okay, and then one more question, please. I was looking at the products that contain PFAS. Is there an education program just out for the public? Because I like going to the spa and getting my nails and toes done. I'm looking at this nail polish. I'm like, oh no, I'm contributing to this mess. So is there an education program where, hey, you could help this by using reusable bags or that type of thing?
Thank you, Councilmember. You know, we have some educational materials on our website, and I will make sure to get that to Peter to share with you all. And, you know, I think there's also that links to other resources too, so people can better understand what is in, what products contain PFAS.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, actually.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you so much.
Member Anderson and then Member Russell.
Thank you,
Go
Mayor.
ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Director Van Ryn, Director Rowan, for speaking to us on this topic today. My question is just some more specifics around the notice we're going to have to issue, mostly so I can just explain it clearly to the constituents if it comes up. What exactly was why weren't we allowed to issue that extension? Is that something we normally, are we allowed to issue extensions, and how did we miss that, kind of overlook that requirement?
So I'm gonna try and get this. It's complicated, but I'm gonna try and get this right. So that fall, there was a transition of how the program was being administered by the state, and in that transition period, we had worked with the state to issue extensions on a couple locations that the change occurred while that extension was that initial request for extension was in place, and then we assumed that change allowed us to act on those previously issued extensions, which technically we weren't able to do, and it was on those two sites. And so essentially what this is just coming into compliance with the backflow program and giving, when we identify for especially a large user the need for a backflow, this isn't a couple $100. This can be tens of thousands of dollars of investment that's required depending on the size of their line, where they have to, dig in, connect to the pipe. And so the regulation affords us the ability to allow a user, once it's identified, time to come into compliance. I think the original compliance time frame is 120 days. And if a lot of times, especially in the winter, you can't even figure out if it's working by that point in time. So these were both wintertime issues. One was in December, one was in January, and really just came down to a technicality of who was allowed to say, yes, you can add a little bit more time to that. Now, where that actually gets noticed is in our annual consumer confidence report, which is now our annual report. So our CCR is now an annual report for the water system, and towards the end of that, you'll see anywhere where there's a potential violation, and it just gets reported there, which we've had those in the past, and they're typically things that are associated with compliance schedules, or like we had one for the overhead tanks where the overhead tanks weren't re-inspected in the time frame that they were supposed to be, and so that was one of the ones that we had to notice a few years ago. And so this was really just somewhat a misunderstanding through the fall on two specific extensions that in reality, step back, there's no real issue associated with them, but in terms of technically staying in compliance, we have to report that.
Very good, thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you both for being here this evening and for the report you've given. And I have one question, and I don't have the exact address, but apparently there were some issues with a backflow device in the 3500 block of South Clarkson, because there was, and I don't know if you all know about this, I was kind of assuming it might have been that newer property there, because all of the residents were posting that they were being charged $4,000 to fix the backflow system. Is there anything like that been going on?
Let me, I'm gonna check with, are you familiar with this site, or is anybody? So that might be a specific thing that we have to look into,
Okay.
Because it's a specific address. I'd hate to try and venture an answer if we don't have it. But if you can get us the address, we'll look it up and find out what's going on with it.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then I just want to thank you for the care that you took and for your openness and transparency. It may be uncomfortable for people, but the reason we have laws is to protect the people, and maybe there wasn't a danger, but maybe there was. And so I thank you both very much for making sure that we're transparent and doing the right things, and for you, Director Van Ryn, for moving forward on all the other issues that we've been dealing with. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions or comments from members of council? Well, Director Rowland, Director Van Ryn, thank you very much for the update on the environmental and compliance programs. Thank you very much for your time tonight. And I'm sure that we'll have further conversations here in the future. So thank you both.